What would you do if a teenage girl collapsed at your feet in a hospital parking garage, and the only name she could whisper before losing consciousness belonged to a man who made judges cross the street when they saw his car? Maren Quinn had just finished a 12-hour shift at Boston General when it happened. She was walking to her car with her shoes in one hand and her keys in the other, because her feet had stopped tolerating leather at hour 9. The garage was half empty at that time of night. Fluorescent lights buzzed 2 floors up. Rain moved through the open sides in thin, cold curtains. She heard it before she saw it. A sound like a bag dropped from a height. Wet and sudden. The girl was maybe 16. Dark hair plastered to her face. School uniform. Blazer with a crest on the breast pocket, white shirt, dark skirt. She had gone down hard against the concrete pillar and was trying to push herself upright with one arm that would not hold her weight. Maren dropped her shoes. She was beside the girl before she finished thinking about it. 2 years of nursing school. 4 years on the floor, and her hands already knew where to go. Pulse at the neck. Fast, unsteady. Breathing. Shallow but present. Pupils unequal when she pulled her phone flashlight over the girl's face. "Hey," Maren said. "Hey, look at me. What's your name?" The girl's mouth moved. A name came out thin and broken. Not her own. Sloan. And then, softer, almost swallowed. "Call Sloan. Please." Maren frowned. "Is Sloan your mom? A friend? Is Sloan your mom? A friend? I need a number, honey." The girl's hand moved to her blazer pocket. Her fingers shook too badly to manage the zipper. Maren opened it herself and found a phone, cracked screen, no lock. In the contacts, pinned at the top, one entry with no name. Only an initial. S. Maren looked at the girl. She had gone pale in a way that had nothing to do with the cold. Her lips were slightly blue at the corners. She dialed. The call connected on the second ring. No greeting. Just silence, and then a voice that made the concrete garage feel smaller. "Where is she?" Not a question. A location request. Like the answer was already expected and only the coordinates were missing. Maren's throat tightened. "I'm a nurse at Boston General. I found a girl in the parking structure. Level 2, north stairwell. She's conscious, but barely. Head injury. Unequal pupils. Possible internal. Do not move her." The voice was level, unhurried, and more frightening for both of those things. "Do not call the police." Maren sat back on her heels. The girl's hand had found her wrist and was holding it with the grip of someone trying not to drown. "She needs a hospital," Maren said. "She has one. You're standing in its parking structure." A pause. "What is your name?" "Maren Quinn." "Maren." The way he said it was not warm. It was exact, like he had filed it somewhere he would not lose it. "I need you to stay with her for 8 minutes." She looked at the girl, at the blood drying behind her ear, at the way her chest rose and fell too carefully. "And if she stops breathing in those 8 minutes, then you call anyone you need to call." A beat. "But she won't?" The line stayed open. Maren could hear background noise, a room, people, something being moved. Then all of it cut out as if a door had shut on the world. She put the phone face up on the concrete beside her and leaned over the girl. "What's your name? Your actual name?" The girl's eyes moved to her. Dark brown, glassy with pain, but tracking. "Juno." "Okay, Juno. I'm Maren. I'm going to stay right here." She unzipped her scrub top and pressed it gently against the wound at the back of Juno's head. The cold hit her work shirt instantly. "Can you tell me what happened?" Juno's mouth moved. Then she seemed to make a decision. They were waiting outside school. Maren kept her voice even. "Who was waiting?" Juno closed her eyes. "I don't know. 2 of them, they said." She winced. "They said to give Sloan a message." "What message? That he should stop asking questions about the Meridian contracts." Maren did not know what that meant. She filed it the way she filed strange things in trauma bays. Present, noted, not for her to unpack. Headlights swept across the garage ceiling. Then engines. Not one. 4. Black SUVs came up the ramp in close formation. They spread across the level before they fully stopped. Doors opened. Men in dark clothing. One carried a hard-sided medical case. Another was already on the phone. A third swept the corners of the garage with his eyes before he let the rest of his body follow. Then the man from the phone stepped out of the second vehicle. He was taller than she expected, somewhere in his late 30s, with the kind of posture that came from never having needed to ask twice for anything. Dark suit, no tie. His hair was dark and close-cut, his jaw carrying 2 days of shadow that looked deliberate rather than careless. He moved across the garage with his eyes already on Juno, and when he dropped to one knee beside her, the rest of the men stopped moving as if they'd been switched off. "I'm here," he said. 2 words. The girl's face changed completely. "Sloan," she said. His hand closed around hers. Carefully, like he was holding something he was terrified of breaking. Maren shifted back to let the medic in. He was professional, efficient, quiet. She watched his hands move and saw that he knew what he was doing. The man, Sloan, looked at Maren over Juno's shoulder. His eyes were gray, the kind of gray that made you feel assessed. "You kept her talking," he said. "It's protocol." Maren pulled her ruined scrub top from the wound so the medic could take over. "She has unequal pupils. You need imaging. The hospital is right, not this hospital." He straightened. "She'll be seen somewhere better." Maren stood too. Her knees were cold from the concrete. "With respect, Boston General is a level 1 trauma center, and this girl has a head injury that could—" "With respect," he said, and the phrase in his mouth was not quite an interruption, not quite an agreement. "The people who put her here work 2 floors above your head." The garage felt very quiet. Maren looked at Juno, then at the medic, who had stopped waiting for an argument and was already preparing to move her. Then back at the man standing in the space between her and the vehicles. She said, "Where are you taking her?" "Harwick Medical. Private wing. I know Harwick. It's 30 minutes north with no traffic." "There won't be traffic." He said it simply. "And we'll make it 20. A stretcher appeared from the third SUV. Juno was lifted with practiced, careful hands. She cried out once, small and sharp. The sound had something to Sloane's face that he could not quite contain. Maren made a decision that the sensible part of her brain registered as a bad one. "I'm coming with her." He looked at her. "You're not obligated. She asked me to stay." Something in his expression shifted. Not warmth exactly. Recognition. "Then ride in the second vehicle," he said. "You can see her through the divider." She did not have her shoes. She did not have her bag. She climbed into the black SUV in damp hospital socks and told herself she had made worse calls. She had not. The convoy moved through Boston like it owned the roads, which Maren gathered in some functional sense it did. Traffic lights changed ahead of them. A police cruiser at one intersection didn't even look up. She sat in the rear passenger seat. The man called Sloan sat across from her. The divider between them and the front vehicle was glass, and through it she could see Juno's stretcher and the medic working. "She's stable," Sloan said without looking at the glass. "You can tell that from here?" Kovacs would have signaled otherwise. Maren looked at the medic. "Is he a doctor?" "Physician's assistant. Former military medicine. He's the best person you'll find at 2 in the morning in a parking garage." She studied him. "You have everything ready to go all the time." "I try to." "That's not normal." Sloan looked at her. "No," he said. "It's not." She looked back through the glass. "What does Juno mean to you?" "She's my ward." He paused. "Her father was my closest friend. Was. He died 14 months ago." His voice did not change texture on the word. It stayed exact and level. That made it worse. "He asked me to look after her. I have been, imperfectly." She said people were waiting outside her school. Sloane's jaw moved. "I know. She said they left you a message." His eyes moved to her. She held them. She had spent 4 years holding eye contact with people in pain who did not want to be looked at. She was good at it. "She told you that," he said. "She told me before she knew I wasn't a threat." Sloane was quiet for a moment. The city moved past the tinted windows. The Meridian contracts are a real estate arbitration I'm involved in. Someone would prefer I stop being involved. So they hurt a teenager. So they made a choice about what matters to me. He looked at Juno through the glass. They were correct. The words were not said with anger. That was the thing. Anger would have been easier. Harwick Medical was everything Boston General was not, at least not at that hour, and not for people who came through parking garages on gurneys. The corridor they wheeled Juno through was quiet and warm, framed prints on the walls, floors that shone under low lighting, nurses who spoke softly and moved fast without seeming to rush. A doctor met them at a set of double doors and spoke to Sloan in a low, steady voice. CT within the hour. Neurology consult already paged, a room prepared. Maren stood to one side. No one had asked her for identification. No one had asked who she was. She was beginning to understand that this was also one of Sloane's arrangements. She found a chair in the private waiting area. Someone brought her tea and a pair of hospital-issue slipper socks, which she found both deeply thoughtful and deeply unsettling. Sloane appeared in the doorway 10 minutes later. His sleeves were rolled now. He sat across from her with the look of a man who had been awake too long pretending it didn't matter. She's with the imaging team, he said. Good. Maren held her tea. Who knew her route tonight? His eyes focused on her. That's a specific question. Someone waited outside the right school at the right time. That's not random. She kept her voice even. Either someone has been watching her for a while, or someone who knew her schedule told them. Sloane said nothing, which was its own kind of answer. How many people have access to her schedule? He looked toward the corridor where Juno had disappeared. Her school administrator, her driver, mine technically, my assistant, my head of logistics. Anyone else? A pause. My partner. Business partner? Yes. Maren held her tea in both hands. The warmth was the only thing that felt straightforward at that moment. Has your partner been unhappy about the Meridian situation? Sloane went very still. You can tell a lot, Maren said carefully, by watching who asks questions before they need the answers. She was not sure why she said it. It had been more than a year since she'd trusted her instincts about anything beyond a patient's vitals. But there was something about sitting in a fluorescent parking garage with a teenager's blood drying on her hands that had scraped her back down to basic observation. Sloane looked at her for a long time. His expression did not change, but something behind it did. What is your position at Boston General? Night shift floor nurse. Pediatric trauma. How long? 4 years. 2 before that in nursing school. Before that I was a pre-med dropout who realized I was better with the living than the theoretical. You're not afraid of me. She considered that. I'm cautious of you, that's different. He almost smiled. It moved across his face like something that had been trying to happen for a long time and only made it part way. Most people in a car with me right now would be pretending to check their phones. I don't have my phone. I left my bag in the garage. His expression shifted to something briefly surprised. He leaned back and said something to the man posted at the door. Within a few minutes her bag appeared. Her shoes came separately, wrapped in a dry cloth. She stared at them. You work fast, she said. I have to. He said it without satisfaction. It is the only way I know. The doctor returned at 1:30. Maren stood when he entered. So did Sloane. The news was not as bad as she'd feared. No bleed on the brain. Concussion, moderate. Contusions along the ribs and left shoulder. Lacerations on both forearms. Defensive, the doctor said, which meant Juno had fought back. Maren had expected that. She had already liked this girl. Sloane's shoulders dropped by 1 degree. Maren noticed because she had been watching for it. He said, When can I see her? She's asking for you now. He moved, then stopped beside Maren. Will you come? She blinked. She asked for you. She asked for you first, he said. In the garage, that puts you ahead of me tonight. It was not a joke. He said it with an honesty so direct it was almost uncomfortable. Juno's room was dim and warm. She looked smaller against clean sheets, the way people always looked smaller once the crisis had given way to aftermath. But her eyes were open, and they moved to Maren with something that was not surprise. You're still here, Juno said. I told you I would be. You didn't have to. People keep saying that to me tonight. Maren sat in the chair beside the bed. I'm starting to find it unhelpful. Juno almost laughed, then winced. Then gave up and laughed anyway. Sloane came to the other side of the bed. He didn't say anything immediately. He just stood there, in the way of people who have learned that presence matters more than words. I saw the tattoo, Juno said. Her voice had gone quiet. Sloane's expression tightened. Which one? The man who held me down. His left forearm. A compass rose. Not the nautical kind, the filled-in kind. All black. Maren looked at Sloane. His jaw was working. You're sure? He said. I have a good memory. Juno looked at him steadily. You've told me that's a liability about 700 times. Tonight it's a gift. He said it low. Then, did they say anything else? One of them almost said a name. Another one stopped him. Juno's brow furrowed. The one who stopped him said, he said, not yet. Holt wants it clean. The name moved through the room like a draft from a window left open. Sloane stood back. He touched Juno's hand once, then his face became something else entirely. Not cold, colder than cold, the temperature of a decision that had already been made. He looked at Maren over Juno's head. Stay with her. She held his gaze. Until you're back. He nodded. Then he left. For a while, the room was quiet. Juno's heart monitor kept its steady count. A nurse appeared, checked something, disappeared. Juno said, he's going to do something now that he can't undo. Probably, Maren said. Does that bother you? Maren thought about it honestly. She had spent 4 years in a hospital full of people making irreversible choices. She had learned not to confuse the decision with the direction. I don't know yet, she said. Juno looked at her. Most people who end up in his orbit at 2 in the morning are either terrified or paid. I'm neither. I know. A pause. That's why he'll keep talking to you. Maren said nothing. She looked at the window that showed only darkness and a few ground-level lights. He keeps everything, Juno said. Grievances, debts, promises. He held my father's hand while he died, and he has never talked about it. Not once, not to anyone that I know of. He just started rearranging his life around the hole my dad left. Maren turned toward her. He doesn't ask people to do things, Juno said. He arranges for things to be possible and lets people choose. She looked at the ceiling. He offered my school's entire music program a grant last year, because I mentioned in passing that they were cutting orchestra. He didn't tell me he did it. I found out from my teacher. That sounds like a man who expresses things indirectly. Or a man who thinks feelings are only safe when they're practical. Juno closed her eyes. His wife died 4 years ago. He doesn't talk about that either. The room held that information quietly. Maren asked, what was her name? Delia. Juno's voice went soft. She would have liked you. She used to say the people worth trusting were the ones who showed up without being asked. Sloane was gone for 90 minutes. When he returned, he looked like a man who had made the ocean smaller. His jacket was gone. His sleeves were down again. He stood in the doorway and looked at Juno first, and only after confirming what he needed to confirm did he look at Maren. Holt, Maren said. My partner, he said, for 11 years. She didn't say she was sorry. He would have found the pity worse than the information. What are you going to do? What needs to be done? He came into the room and sat in the second chair. What I should have done 3 weeks ago when the contract started disappearing from the shared server. You knew something was wrong. I suspected. I wanted to be wrong. He looked at his hands. I gave him time to become someone I didn't have to stop. Maren thought about that, about the things people allowed themselves to not know because knowing meant acting, and acting meant loss. That's not weakness, she said. He looked up at her. Wanting to be wrong about someone you trusted for 11 years. She held his gaze. That's just being human. He looked at her the way people looked at someone who had said the exact right thing and hadn't known it. He had the compass rose tattooed 3 months ago, Sloane said. His men. His mark. I thought it was territorial vanity. A pause. It was a flag. Juno had fallen asleep. The room was steady and warm. Maren said quietly, "Are there others, his men, who are also your men?" 3. Possibly 4. He looked at the window. They've been given to the right people to be asked the right questions. She did not ask what the right questions meant or who the right people were. She understood that some answers were covered in things she didn't want on her hands, and that Sloane, to his credit, was not asking her to hold them. He said, "You'll need somewhere to stay tonight. If Holt knows Juno's schedule, he may know who found her." Maren sat straighter. She had not thought about that. She thought about it now, very quickly, and did not enjoy where it led. "I have an apartment," she said. "Holt's men have been operating in this city for at least 3 months without my knowing. I'd rather not trust that your apartment is private." "I'm not staying in one of your places," she said immediately. "No," he said, and his voice was level and unsurprised. "You wouldn't be. I have a contact at the Aldrich Hotel on Boylston. Secure building, discreet staff, direct line to Kovacs if you need anything during the night. Your name would not appear on any registration." She looked at him. "You're asking." He paused. "Yes. You're not telling. You're not arranging it and presenting it as a fact." "No." "Why not?" He was quiet for a moment. "Because Juno would tell me I was being impossible." Maren looked at the sleeping girl, then back at the man across the bed from her. He was watching her in a way that was careful and very still, not calculating. Something with more uncertainty in it than that. "All right," she said. "One night." The hotel was exactly as described. Maren showered and stood in the bathroom afterward, looking at herself in the mirror for longer than she meant to. She looked like a woman who had walked into someone else's crisis and kept going on instinct. She looked like someone who had not made a safe decision in several hours and was not entirely sorry about it. She thought about what Juno had said. About Delia, about a man who rearranged his life around holes. She picked up the room phone and dialed the number she'd been left. Sloane answered on the second ring. "Juno," she said. "Sleeping. Vitals stable. Kovacs is with her." A pause. "How are you?" The question was direct and ordinary and somehow surprising from him. "I keep seeing the garage," she said. The way she looked when she was trying to push herself up. "Yes. She's stronger than she looked. She gets that from her father." A longer pause. "He used to say that courage wasn't loudness. It was continuing to function while afraid." Maren sat on the edge of the bed. "Were you afraid tonight?" Silence. "Then I have been afraid every day for the last 14 months. She didn't know what to say, so she said, "Thank you for telling me that." Another pause. When he spoke again, his voice had changed slightly. Not softer exactly, more honest. "Thank you for staying with her. You keep thanking me. You keep doing things that warrant it." She was quiet for a moment. "Sloane," she said, and it was the first time she'd used his name without it being a repeat of someone else's. It felt different. He noticed. She could hear it in the half-second before he answered. "Yes. Don't go after Holt angry. Go after him correctly." A long quiet. "You're not the first person to say that to me tonight," he said. "Juno?" She said it before she fell asleep. A pause that carried something in it. "You two are going to be a problem for me." Maren almost smiled. "I think you mean an improvement." He didn't answer right away. When he did, it was quiet, and she thought she heard something in it that had not been there at the start of the night. "Get some sleep, Maren." She set the phone down and lay back on the unfamiliar bed in the unfamiliar room and listened to Boston settle into whatever passed for silence in a city that never really found it. 3 weeks passed. Juno healed the way teenagers healed, faster than made sense, and with a frustration at the slowness of it that contradicted the speed. Her bruises went from purple to green to a yellow that faded out somewhere around the 10-day mark. She returned to school with Kovacs trailing her at a distance she had negotiated down from 2 feet to half a block. Maren returned to Boston General. Her shifts resumed. Her patients resumed. The ordinary business of living went on. Holt's unraveling was quieter than she expected. No news stories, no arrests she could find in any public record. What she knew from Sloane in increments when he thought she needed to know it. The Compass Rose tattoo matched 3 men in Sloane's organization who had been quietly moved outside the city, with enough evidence attached to them to end any future ambitions. Holt himself, Sloane told her on the phone one evening, had chosen departure over confrontation when presented with what Julian, his information officer, a wiry, methodical man with wire-rimmed glasses, had assembled. He left, Maren said. He was given the shape of the door, Sloane said. He found it quickly. Are you satisfied with that? A long pause. He did not touch Juno himself. He made choices about what mattered to me and acted on them. That is already more than most men survive in my world. Another pause. But she's alive. That counts for more than satisfaction. Maren thought about that for a long time after the call. She ran into him unexpectedly on a Tuesday afternoon outside a cafe on Newbury Street. He was walking with Juno on one side and a heavy-set man she didn't recognize on the other. He saw her before she saw him, which she suspected was the way things usually went with him. He said her name. Just that. She stopped. Juno's face broke into the first genuinely unguarded smile Maren had seen outside the hospital. She's real, Juno said in a tone that suggested this had been open to debate. I'm real, Maren said. They had coffee. The heavy-set man turned out to be Sloane's real estate attorney, who excused himself after 20 minutes with the practiced diplomacy of someone long accustomed to making himself scarce at the right moments. Juno drank a hot chocolate and provided a running commentary on her orchestra, which had received an anonymous grant 3 months prior and was now rehearsing Divock. Sloane said almost nothing. He watched Juno with the focused attention of someone who had decided to do better and was keeping score internally. He watched Maren with something quieter. After Juno went to the restroom, he said, I've been thinking about something. That doesn't narrow it much, Maren said. No. He looked at his coffee. When Juno asked for the call to be made, she didn't know you. She had never seen you before. She was hurt and frightened, and you were the first contact in her phone. She told me last week, Sloane said, that she knew you were safe. Maren looked at him. Because I dropped to my knees in a dirty parking garage. Because you didn't ask what was in it for you. She was quiet. I'm not built for easy gestures, he said. It was not an apology or a warning. It was simply a fact offered in good faith. I know how to arrange, how to protect, how to move pieces into position. I'm learning how to be present without it becoming a strategy. Juno's teaching you. Juno's been teaching me since she was 12. Something crossed his face. But she's 14 now. She'll be grown soon, and I'll have spent the last 2 years of it learning things I should have known when I was your age. Maren looked at him. You're not that much older than me. In years, perhaps not. She leaned back in her chair. Outside, Newbury Street moved through a cold, clear afternoon. A woman walked a dog. A delivery cyclist wove between parked cars. Boston, being Boston, unremarkable and continuous. I don't want to be an arrangement, Maren said. I know. And I don't want to become part of your other world. I would keep that line, he said, as long as I could. Which is the honest version of the promise. She looked at him. At the careful steadiness of him. At the wedding ring that was no longer on his hand, which she had noticed 2 weeks ago and said nothing about. Your question, then, she said. Whatever it was. He looked at her directly. Have dinner with me. Not arranged. Not a room I own or a table I hold permanently. Somewhere ordinary, where neither of us is known. She considered it. She thought about parking garages and blood-soaked scrub tops and a girl who had known she was safe before she'd had any logical reason to. There's a place on Tremont, she said. They make their own pasta. The tables are too close together and the lighting is terrible. That sounds right, he said. Thursday, she said. Thursday, he said. Juno came back from the restroom and looked between them with the expression of someone who had already known the outcome and was simply waiting for the principals to catch up. That evening, Maren took a different route home than usual. She passed Boston General. She looked at the parking structure, level 2, north stairwell. The fluorescent light that had buzzed above the concrete pillar was working tonight, steady and indifferent to what had happened underneath it. She thought about a girl she'd never met falling at her feet, about a number called without knowing who would answer, about a voice that said 8 minutes and meant it and was right. She thought about Delia, who Maren would never know, and who had loved a man who expressed things in grants and hotels on Boylston Street and dinner reservations on Tremont. She thought about what it meant to show up without being asked. She kept walking. The city was cold and loud and entirely itself, and somewhere across it a man was learning to be present, and a girl was playing Devoch, and Maren Quinn was going home to sleep without the garage in her eyes for the first time in 3 weeks. Thursday was coming. That was enough.